Good morning, Tony Dottino here with you on Wednesday. And I look at the calendar and my goodness, it's the middle of the week and we're into April the 9th already. It's like, whoa, the days keep going by and it is just amazing to see how quick time is flying by in the year 2025. And so I'm in the LA Fitness Center yesterday and had a little bit of extra time. I was having my car maintenance done. So I had a little bit of extra time in the LA Fitness that's nearby, the dealer where I do my car maintenance. And so I got a chance to sit into the sauna for about 15 minutes, which is about as much as one would want to take in a sauna, the heat and the sweat. There were several other people that were in it. And somehow we got into an interesting conversation about what these two gentlemen did before they retired. Both of them happened to have worked for Disney in the construction world and building buildings, which was interesting, in learning about the buildings and the major developments that they were each a part of before they left Disney to pursue their own businesses, which is interesting because here were two people that were heavily involved in major construction projects in Disney, and both decided to leave Disney and take on a different world in their own personal lives and start their own businesses, which they both were saying were very helpful, very successful, and very worthwhile. But we got into talking about, one was doing about his buildings and what he does, and another one, and so the next thing, well, what do you do? And so I told them, and they both looked at me right away and said, oh my goodness, we don't have a good memory. And I basically told them, look, I'm the founder of the USA Memory Championship, and it's been wonderful for 25 years helping people learn how to improve their memories and how they can go about dealing with things that they forget or they lose focus on. And so they looked at me with this like, well, are there a couple of tips that you can give us? And so the first thing I thought about was, the very first thing I said to them is, you have to remember to remember. And they kind of looked at me like, huh? Like, you have to remember to remember? And so I said to him, I said, the first tip about memory is you have to create your own focus to say, I want to remember something. People go about their day, and there's so much stuff going by them in today's day and age, that and our brains are just taking so much of that, just flushing it right through and saying, okay, but unless something unusual happens, or unless something that's meaningful to yourself happens, we tend to just let it run through, as we say, one ear out the other. And so what I was saying to them is, you need to have a focus when you want to remember something, that you want to remember it, and then decide to say, how am I going to put focus on this to be able to store it into your brain? And I gave them a very simple example, and they both immediately got to it. I said, you go to Disney, right? You worked at Disney, you go to their parking lots. You go to their parking lots, and they do all they can about the characters and the signs and helping you to remember. Why do they do that? Because so many people go into these huge parking lots with thousands of cars, put their car somewhere, jump on a tram or run to the front entrance, and never stop to focus on where they put their cars. So Disney, on their trams, they remind you over and over again on their tram rides, here's where you parked your car, remember this when you're done with your day at the park, where you parked your car. And boy, did I relate to that, because there are times when I ran for the tram, especially at Epcot. I do a better job if I go to the Magic Kingdom, but at Epcot, there are very often I go there for the entertainment shows they do during the Wine and Food Festival in the Garden, and looking for different groups. And I have to be very intentional and very conscious to focus on where I'm parking my car. Because I tend to either run to the front entrance, which in that case I'm not on a tram, So nobody's reminding me where I park. So I walk quickly to the front entrance because I tend to be impatient when I'm there for some of the shows they do, and I try to give myself a little extra time to stop and take a break before I get to the stage. But the point of the matter is, if I'm not on a tram with a driver or a speaker telling me where I just parked my car, I've got to stop and remind myself of where I parked my car. And there have been a few times where, when I was done with my day at Epcot, I come back to the parking lot and say, now what row did I park in? How far down? And I've paid that price a few times. And my point is, there are times I thought my car was stolen. It's like, God, somebody took my car. It's not here in the parking lot. And eventually I obviously found it. My cars have never been stolen. And I'm happy to say I've always found them. But my goodness, it's that focus. So the first tip I gave them is, when you're parking a car, you're putting your keys down. You're putting some important papers down that you need. You're trying to remember where you dropped where you last left your cell phone when you were finished with your last call. You need to be able to be conscious in that moment to say, I put my keys at the front door, or I put my keys on the kitchen counter. And then the simple way to do that is always put your keys, as soon as you walk into the house, in the same spot. And this way you trained your brain to focus. If I go to that spot, I'll always find the keys. We might get into trouble if we're bringing the keys in sometimes when we got bags of groceries and the phone is ringing, and then we be distracted and we lose our focus. So the thing that I was telling them is, you have to create this focus, and when you want to remember something, you need to want to make a conscious effort to study, where have I put this, or where have I done something that I want to remember. So if you're walking through the park and you want to remember a place that you want to go back to, you have to take a conscious effort to say, okay, I want to come back to this particular part in the park, and I want to make a note of why I want to come back to that park, and then go about moving forward. The other thing we talked about, and they were like, oh my goodness, you're absolutely right, was how do you remember people's names and faces? And in their world, they're meeting people all the time, and it's even more important in their independent world and not working for a major company anymore, that they learn how to remember names and faces of people they're meeting, especially people they want to remember. And so the very simple tip I said to them was, the very first thing is, don't worry and don't focus on what you're going to say. Focus on your listening. They looked at me like, yeah, well, people like to talk. I said, exactly. So learn something about them, getting their name. You might want to spell it. Hey, that's Tony. Is that a Tony? And is that Dottino? Is that the way you spell your last name, Dottino? Is it got two T's or one T? And so what you want to be able to do is focus on listening to what they have to say, as opposed to, you'll remember what you want to say, or you'll grab something different to say as they talk to you, and you'll connect and relate to them. So in your business world of networking, it's more important that you learn more about the people you're talking to than learning more about yourself by what you're going to talk about. And one of the gentlemen said, yeah, that's such a great point, because one thing I've learned in my business is people love to talk. And I said, terrific. And here's the good news. The more they talk about themselves, the more links and associations it creates for you to be able to hook onto, so you can retain more information. And the myth that we have is, the more information we learn about something, we think it's harder to remember it, when in actuality, the way our brains work, the more information you can learn about someone that you focus on, the easier it becomes to learn more about them and to be more interactive. So it almost works counterintuitive to what people think is like, God, if I have to cram. Now, if you're in college and schools and you're cramming, that's not the way to learn and retain. But if you're meeting people in the world today and you're learning 3 or 4 things about them, that helps you to create a network of fibers in the brain, or a network of neurons that help you to grab onto one of those and let it link into its system, and helps you to retain and remember. which then can bring you back to their name. And they just sat there and said, boy, this stuff makes so much sense. He said, and here's the magical question I always get asked. Why haven't we learned this in school? Why hasn't somebody taught us this before? When you're meeting people all the time and social interactions is so important, especially if you're in business. Why didn't we ever learn this? Why didn't we ever get taught this in schools? And I keep scratching my head and saying, I don't know. The skills that we use every day in our lives as we socialize and meet people, I still scratch my head as to why don't we teach some of these skills in schools and learn them before we get to the business world. And that's my Live with Tony for you today. It was a great time. I enjoyed my time. Got the car taken care of and back into my normal schedule. So off I go now to the Memory Institute over at the YMCA at Dr. Phillips.